guys excited?
Yes, sir.
Kids are going back to school.
Hallelujah.
I hear the parents sing amen. The kids not so much. Yeah. Awkward moment. But hey, we're doing awkward conversations with Jesus. And you guys chose the verses. So if you don't like the sermons, tough. And this one can get a little weird today. This is actually, it comes out of probably the hardest parable in the book of Luke. Now you guys know I like the book of Luke. This is one of those, honestly, a lot of pastors would skip. And that's one of the fun things, I think. Right now we're kind of taking a fun series where we're jumping around, but usually we preach through books of the Bible because it's easy to skip the ones that are awkward and weird. Whereas this one we're just concentrating on the awkward and weird. But it's easy to skip those, and that's why we teach through, because a lot of people say, I believe in the Bible, but you really have no idea what's in there. Because you can go to church your whole life and people just preach this passage and that one. And so this is one that I think is probably skipped often. And so Jesus says this, use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. So use your worldly resources to make friends. That just seems Bible-y, right? like just before this chapter, there's the story of the prodigal son, and we're not going to go into that, although I love Luke 15. I love the story of the prodigal son. But right in that, he talks about the son who takes the money, the prodigal son. He goes off to a foreign land, and he kind of blows it in wild living. And he makes friends with worldly wealth, and what happens? When he doesn't have it, people are all your friends sometimes. When you're paying the bill, when you're picking up the tab for dinner, you got friends. But when you don't, when you don't have your wallet with you, you'll see who your friends really are. And so it's this awkward one. So we're going to jump into Luke chapter 16. It'll be up here on the screens. Shout out to Lance. Came back from deployment this week. Last week we put him to work this week. If you were here, he threw me off in the end of the sermon because it was like suddenly he was there, and I was like, wait a minute, he's not supposed to be here. So we do, and it's shout out to all our guys on deployment. We love you guys. It's just the fact when you're in Air Force town, people get deployed. So it's been cool to kind of keep up with some of them in the conversations and some comments on the messages. So anyway, Luke chapter 16, we're going to start in verse 1. Jesus told this story to his disciples. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. One day a report came that the manager was wasting the employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, "What's this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you're going to be fired." And a manager, other translations might use the word steward. It's the person who's sort of in charge of your stuff. And if you're a wealthy person, most of us can probably handle our own stuff. Maybe we're barely keeping track of our stuff. But when you have a lot of money, you tend to have people who are in charge of it. And so his full-time job, this guy's in charge of managing this guy's wealth. And, I picture it a lot like maybe if you have a lot of rental properties and things, you might have a property manager. Our landlord is a property manager for some people. And so they don't own the property, but they manage it. And so we're a lot like, if you're a professional athlete, you have a sports manager maybe, or maybe showbiz, you have somebody who's in charge of your stuff. And it's got to be someone you trust because they have the power to spend your money and waste it. And potentially even steal some. And so he hears back, hey, this guy's not spending your money the way he should. You're wasting it. And it's kind of like, is it petty fraud? Is it, often people will get, tagged for embezzlement. It's kind of crazy. You see the articles in the newspaper sometimes, like some little organization, the fire company or something, and it's, I'm not mentioning any article in particular right now on purpose, so I hope that wasn't any. But people kind of take money, so that's this kind of thing. He's wasting, he's squandering it, kind of a lot like, it's funny because this is right after the prodigal son. The prodigal son squandered and wasted his inheritance, and it says, get your report in order. Basically, he's like, you're fired. and I'm thinking of a certain reality show. You're fired right now, but I'm afraid to mention that, so I won't mention that, because if I mention that, then we're going to get a political debate, and again, we separate you when you come in, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, and then we let you all fight at the end. No. Anyway, I'm going to avoid that controversial topic. But, you know, it's tough losing a job. And if you've ever been there, you understand then there's pressures and worries and concerns you have, because, you know, depending on if you have a family, it doesn't tell us, but you're kind of wondering, you know, what about my mortgage? You know, what's my family going to do? And then the older you get, the more challenging that sometimes becomes. Because your salary requirements are generally more. There might not be all the entry level opportunities. I mean, you could have, you know, a PhD in rocket science, and you can't really go to, you know, to KFC to get a job, because they're looking at you like, oh, you're a little overqualified, and they'll, you know, and so they're kind of, we don't want to hire you. And so he's kind of in this tough job. If he was a manager, he probably was, you know, older, and he's not sure what he's going to do. And it's interesting, he doesn't even try to defend himself. Like, no, I really haven't wasted it. He's kind of like more like, yeah, you got me. I've been squandering. And so it says this, the manager thought to himself, now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches. He's like, you know, white collar worker. He's like, I can't do this. My back hurts. I'm getting older. You know, you know what I mean. You know, we were talking earlier about how you get age and your body doesn't work like it used to, and things you used to like. You know, I used to like throw around giant chunks of wood when I'm splitting wood. I was splitting wood yesterday, and it's like the chunks. I'm like, I'm just not willing to pick that up anymore. That's gonna hurt me. But I'm a man, so I do it anyway, and it hurts me. Some of you understand. Those of you who are men or married to a man. It says, now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and I'm too proud to beg. You know, he doesn't want to, you know, be out there begging for money. And he goes, I know what I'll do to ensure I have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired. I mean, literally, he would probably live on the master's estate, so his house and everything's tied to being this manager. And you know, and there's no unemployment in those days, so he's not sure what to do. And he was really in, and I think sometimes we don't understand this in America, but you know, we kind of have pride, you know, to some degree. But then you have to suck it up. And you take whatever job you need to pay the bills. But especially, I had a great conversation with a missionary. I'll tell you more about him if you want later. but I was talking to him about how when you're overseas, there's really this class system in most societies. They wouldn't say you can't get this job or that, but it's like, okay, if you're from this nationality, you live in this country, these are the jobs that are open to you. And if you're, you know, and if you live in this, and he was telling me this story. And he was the director of this business that I won't mention. And so, you know, something had spilled or something. He grabbed a broom to sweep. And they're like, no. Like, the director can't, like, use a broom. Like, in America, like, and so it's that kind of thing. Like, oh, I have all this dignity. I'm important. I can't take this kind of job doing nothing. And so he gets this plan. He hatches it. And so it says he invited each person who owed money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. We called a meeting. He asked the first one, how much do you owe him? The man replied, I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil. That's a lot of olive oil. I mean, I like olive oil. I use olive oil. I like Popeyes, so I know it. 800 gallons of olive oil. That's a lot of olive oil. This is a big commodity. He goes, take the bill quickly and change it to 400 gallons. That's a good deal, right? Like, you owed 800 gallons. That's a ton of money. Now you owe 400 gallons. Or you're like, yeah, half off. This is like buy one, get one free day. You know, and so suddenly your debt has gone from astronomical to just staggering. You know, like, it's a lot, and that's kind of an important thing for him. He's like, hey, this is great. You know, and even just this quantity kind of tells you the idea of it. The quantity suggests like maybe 20 times the average family farm. So this is extensive. Extensive holdings. It says, and how much do you owe my employer? He asked the next man. I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat, was the reply. Here, the manager said, take the bill and change it to 800. You know, again, it's not half off, but it's a pretty good deal. I mean, if you owe $1,000 and someone now says you owe $800, you'd be happy, right? If your mortgage payment is $1,000 a month and someone said, hey, now it's just $800, you know, yeah, it's not free, but you'd be happy, right? And I always say if it's free, it's me. And so imagine your credit card bill or something just being slashed out. How would you feel? Pretty good. How would you feel towards the person who helped you do that? Pretty good. Now, and we may not feel like a social obligation to them. You know, we just like, hey, thanks, and move on. But in that society, especially, there's been this obligation. I've helped you, you helped me. And they're sort of complicit in the theft, right? Like, hey, I could tell that this used to be 1,000 and now it's 800. I could tell them that this used to be 800, now it's 400. And so this is why if you get fired today, I wonder if it has to do with this parable. You generally get escorted out by security right from the firing meeting. You know, you turn in your keys and everything. If you've ever had to go through that, it's that awkward process where they take all your passwords and everything. They shut, like, you know, IT is at your desk while you're in the meeting and they're shutting things down. My favorite modern story of this was a couple years ago. I don't even know who this, British entertainment retailer, HMV. I don't even know if they're still around. But it was funny because they called everyone into a giant room and started doing mass layoffs. What they didn't do was get the guy with the Twitter password and lock down that account. So he's live tweeting everything they're saying to him, you know, so across the world. And then it's like at one point, my favorite one was, you know, one post, they said, there's a guy who was tweeting, he said, just overheard our marketing director, he's staying, folks, ask, how do I shut down Twitter? Because, you know, if you have the keys to the kingdom, you can do some damage and stuff like this. And so this guy really takes advantage of that little interim between being fired and handing over the books to do some stuff. Now, here's the thing. It says, the rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. It's not really what you're expecting, right? You're expecting him to flip out. Like, I'd be angry if you owed me 1,000 bushels a week, now I'm getting 800. If you owed me 800 gallons of olive oil, I guess that's a lot of money. I don't know, I want all 800 gallons, but I wouldn't mind that cash, right? And it says, you know, to admire being so shrewd, and Jesus said, and it is true that the children of the world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of light. Now, the boss is impressed. Now, I always think of that kind of like, you know, if you have kids, you understand what I mean. Your kids sometimes will do something that's wrong, that's bad, that you're like, they shouldn't do that. But all you can do is laugh because it's also so funny. So you're trying to discipline them, but you're kind of laughing. You're like, that's hilarious, though. I can't believe you said that. You know, I can't believe you did that. It's that kind of moment where, you know, hey, I know I should be mad at you for like totally ripping me off here, but that's kind of cool, too, that you thought of this. You know, it's funny though. This guy, I mean, if he'd been so shrewd as the manager, he'd probably still be employed, right? Yeah. You know, because some of you are better at getting. You work harder to get out of work than to work. Or at least you know some of those. I'm just saying. You just know some. I'm sure it's none of us here. Teenagers, like, I mean, they argue forever. Just clean your room. Well, you know, and you do this, and just. Anyway, now here's the funny thing. Jesus just tells a story. The main guy is a thief and a squanderer of stuff. The supporting characters are complicit in thievery. And the guy who got ripped off is impressed by them. And so to top that off, this is that pinnacle moment where Jesus tells this crazy story, and the lesson is this. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. That when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. You know, why would Jesus say this? It'd be like if someone breaks into your home and you've had it really secured well, and you're like, good job, how did you get into that? Like, I had a friend who's a professional thief, or used to be, and it was funny because I worked someplace and he was like there, and he's like, hey, this would be easy. And he like explained how to get in through this window, through the ceiling, and he totally ripped us off, you know, like tons of money. And I'm like, I am so glad you're honest now. It's because, hey, that was clever. But, please stop stealing stuff. So you don't congratulate a thief when they get through. And it's funny because this parable is, because it's a little weird, people try to explain it different ways. And people try to say, Jewish people, I just read this the other day, Jewish people couldn't charge interest on money lent out. So some would lend out the equivalent in commodities and get more commodities in return. So they're like, oh, well, he was just trying to kind of knock down this interest that had been roundabout, so he was doing the righteous thing, right? Does it sound like he had righteous motives? No, he had very selfish, I can't work kind of motives here. And some theorize, he's just knocking off interest payments, but, really, he's dishonest. And some people go, oh, well, he was just cutting down his commission that would have been due him later. Like some of you work in sales and, you're trying to sell that TV, but you get like this percent or that percent, or you're trying to, sell insurance, you get this percent. So he's just cutting down his commission. So what he's doing is really not all that bad, right? Well, what is it? It's dishonest. I think, he's not commended for being honest.
Right.
He's commended for being shrewd. Being kind of smart with the way he deals with things. And so what Jesus is trying to say, is he trying to say waste or cheat resources from your boss when you're fired? No, that's probably not a good idea. You go to jail for that kind of stuff, right? Is he saying, is it okay to rip people off when you need it?
No.
I'm not hearing a lot of no's from people. That scares me with this church. No. Is he saying, use your money to make friends? Not really. There's something more there, isn't it? It says this, here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. Welcome you to an eternal home. Use his present situation to set himself up for the future, right? And the clients who are now, they were just clients before, now they're friends. They're complicit with the deceit, and they're going to provide for him later. And the lesson is really to invest in what really matters. We use wealth to build up treasures in heaven. Use resources, including money, to make people friends with Jesus. It's funny, whenever you talk about money in church, it gets awkward, right? Like everyone's like, hallelujah, amen, pass the plate around again, in some traditions you count the offering, and then you go, that's not enough, and they send it around again. We just keep sending it around. And I know that's weird, but it's church people are weird. The longer you're in church, the weirder you get. Look at me. This is what 20 years of this stuff does to you. but it's. And then it's like, I think a lot of us, whenever we talk about money, we think of televangelists.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I'm getting. And honestly, I watch a lot of televangelists. I think they're thinking more about their kingdom than God's kingdom. And then people are like, "Oh, if you don't send money, we're going to shut down." Well, that just sounds like a dying business. Like, if we don't immediately get money, we're shutting down. Well, maybe it's something I don't want to invest in then, because it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of return for it. And here's the thing, though. Jesus talks a lot about money. Now, I haven't worked out the statistics. People say like 1 in 6 parables and different things. And, but really, there's a lot of... I was just looking through Luke this week and looking at many of the places Jesus talks about money. And the truth is, money's important, and how you spend it, is important. Verse 10 says this, if you're faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you're dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you're trustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? And if you're not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? As Christians, we know that money is not the important thing, right? We know that. Does everybody take out their wallet if you have one? Take your wallet out. Mine's small because my fingers are small. Now I want you to give it to the person next to you. I'm kidding.
Of course, come on.
I meant everyone to the right. We know this isn't important, but I would struggle to hand it next to a random person to me at church. Some of you struggle to even hand it to your spouse next to you. Because we can say it's not about the Benjamins, but we're really concerned about this because it affects how we live. Now, you don't have to give anyone your wallet. Here's the thing. As Christians, how you handle your money is important. I think because we're like, oh, it's not about money, it's not about material wealth, and then we just kind of, we can spend it however we want, we do whatever we want, we're like, oh, it's not important, but really money is important. How you spend it is important, and I think how you spend it for the kingdom of God is important, but that bleeds over into how you handle your money. Because it's something that we have now, and we wouldn't take, most of us, anyone, you ever live in an apartment or house that you don't own? And then you watch HGTV, and then you decide to knock out a wall, spend thousands of dollars remodeling, and make it into a beautiful palace. And then your landlord comes and ups your rent $1,000 a month. You're not going to do that. Why? It's not a good investment to improve somebody else's property at your own expense. Because it's a smart thing. We have to be wise about how we use our money. Now, most of us would be wise about not doing that. But then, and I don't know what you spend your money on, what are the other things we invest in? Are they really the important things? Don't be sloppy with your money. It may be temporary, but it's important how we use it. And Jesus says if you manage well, you get more responsibility to manage. He took advantage of what the steward, the manager, he took advantage of what he had access to in order to prepare for the future. And what we have access to as believers, what we have access to should be spent, should be used in a wise manner. It's one thing to make money, it's another thing to make your money count. Jesus said, no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. Now, I remember I had a job, and I can't name the company, but it was when we lived out in LA, and I worked for this company, and I got hired as a temp, and then it was like temp forever. I just meant to temp for a little while, but they kind of talked me into staying, and it was awkward because I was there for probably a couple of weeks, and my immediate manager supervisor person got fired for a good reason. But anyway, so I was working there for weeks and weeks after that, and I was in a meeting one time, and I remember this person talking, and I was like, who's my supervisor? Because I had no idea. And so if somebody said I should do this, I did that. And if someone else said I should do this, I did that. So I had no idea if I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, because I was doing some of what my old manager did. I was doing some of the other things. I was doing some of this. And whatever someone kind of told me to do, I did. I had no idea what I was supposed to do, because I was serving all these different masters. And then she informed me she was actually my supervisor. And then it was a little more clear. Because then I knew what to do. And it's to say you can't love and serve money and really love and serve God. And it's a temptation. It's a problem for all of us. I think especially in America, because we make so much money. If you've ever been to a third world country, we think we're poor, and then you go there and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so much money. It says this: the Pharisees, who dearly loved their money, heard all this and scoffed at him. Then he said to them, you appear righteous in public, but God knows your hearts. What this world honors is detestable in the sight of God. they're mad because they like money. It says they dearly love their money. Now, 1 Timothy 6:10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It doesn't say it's the root of all evil. Sometimes it gets quoted that way because of some bad translations. But, and some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. It's not that money is evil, but loving your money can be evil. But then we also, I think the tension here is that you can't just blow your money on everything and say, oh, well, I just don't love money. But you have to be wise stewards of what you've been given by God. And God's value system is so much different than ours, because I develop ideas and thoughts about what I think is right. We all do, right? It's like our culture influences it, our family influences it, our wants and desires influence it. But often what we decide we desire, what we think is right, is not what God thinks is right. And that's why I think reading the Bible is so important, because it puts things into perspective. We develop one idea of money, and then we read what Jesus says, and we're like, yeah, his is definitely a better idea about money. But we're all, leaky buckets. You can fill yourself up with God, you can fill himself up with his word, but it's like we're leaking all the time. And I think that's why it's important to be reading and be in the Bible, and that's why we teach the Bible, because we naturally leak, and we go back to the natural way we think we should view things, the way our culture views things. I was thinking about money. This morning I got up and I had a bowl of cereal. I know you all wanted that, but to know all about that. But it was that moment. You've been there. You have a gallon of milk that's brand new. Then you have that gallon with a little bit. And I'm cheap, so I'm going to use that little bit first. And so I've gotten smarter as I age. I put a little in a cup and taste it, because I can't tell you how many times I've dumped that little bit in the cereal, and then you start to eat, and you're like, oh! And no amount of sugar really makes it taste better when it's really gone. And you should have known when it was a cream and paste on top of the cereal. And then you look at the expiration date on the milk, and you realize, like, it's cheese by now. Like, it's been way too long, because the expiration date. Very few things are actually legally required to have those, and then it's confusing because there's the sell-by date, the expiration date, the package date. It's all kinds of dates on stuff in your refrigerator, and so you ever have salad that turned into some sort of weird juice in the bag? Don't drink that. I'm just saying. Word of advice from someone who's been there. Sketchy milk. It's got a date on it. You're not sure if you should eat it. We need expiration dates on things like milk, because we'll drink it, because we're idiots. And we'll drink it. But see, because it has an expiration date, no one hoards milk, right? No. Right. I've never heard anybody go, I want to have 80,000 gallons saved up next year. We don't do it because it goes bad. Right. It has an expiration date. Here's the thing, your money has an expiration date. You know why? Because you have an expiration date. There's a 100% chance if you were born, you will die. That should be pretty, self-explanatory. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how much resources you have. It doesn't matter how powerful you are. We all end up in the same place. I actually already own the real estate where my body will end up. That's a funny thing. I own my gravesite. I'm like, I drive by it sometimes. I'm like, yep, that's where I'm going to be. And again, I'm hooking up the U-Haul and everything. That's in my. I've got a bunch of stuff. I need to write them all down so Denise will know. If she, if I go first, I want crazy things. I want, a bowl of candy on my belly at the funeral. I want, because it should be fun too. I want like a U-Haul on the back of the hearse as we pull into, because they always say you don't have a U-Haul attached to a hearse. I just want to do it to be funny. But we do all that because we have a limited lifespan, and our money is really only limited to that. And so it doesn't mean you can't have money. It doesn't mean you can't enjoy life. But we have to invest in things that matter. We tend to invest in things that don't matter. I always laugh. I'm not picking on HGTV, but and the nice shows and stuff. But sometimes I'm like in the gym, it's on, and they're like tearing apart a bathroom that I'm like, I I wish mine looked that nice. And you're destroying that. And, you know, it's not bad, but if you get something really trendy, it looks really bad later. Like, the more cool and trendy your clothes are now in pictures, the funnier they're going to be in 20 years. Because, you know, I'm glad I have yet to find a picture of me in parachute pants from the 80s. I'm just glad that, you know, we didn't have digital media then. And, you know, somewhere on a roll of film in someone's attic is a picture of me in parachute pants that should, you know, go down with the attic. But because we have, I love people. Anyone here got married in the 70s or 80s? I love those pictures. You need to post in the Facebook group today your picture of you getting married and dorky stuff, because, or prom pictures, any of those. I'll take any of them. I love those kind of crazy pictures because they're funny. But you know, we don't invest in things. We tend to invest in things that don't matter. But what really matters is the important things that we invest in. And it's funny, again, I was looking at some things just in Luke, you know, wasting of resources. There's a guy in Luke 12, there's a story, you know, that he has this harvest. He's like, all my barns are full. What am I going to do? I'm going to tear down barns and build bigger barns. And Jesus is like, you fool. Because what? Because he was investing himself and hoarding instead of being generous to the kingdom of God. You know, rich man and Lazarus comes right after this, if you're familiar with the story. Rich man lives, you know, he gets, you know, all the nice clothes, he gets this beautiful, great life, and then, you know, he dies, and he's in the bad place, Lazarus is in the good place, and he's like, hey, you know, could you send him back to warn him? And Jesus is like, hey, there's been plenty of warning. And then it's kind of interesting. It says, you know, they won't even believe if you send someone back from the dead. It's kind of a little, you know, spoiler alert, Easter, what's coming up. Not that Easter's coming up, I meant what's coming up in that book. So clear that I do know the date. You know, and then there's examples of like using resources wisely. And you know, I talk about the story in Luke 19, Zacchaeus all the time. I love it. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, you know, and he's like this little short guy, and you know, I don't know, he never got picked for dodgeball teams and stuff, and you know, he kind of, he becomes this tax collector. He's cheating people. Nobody likes him. He climbs up in a tree, and you know, and then Jesus comes like and beats him like a piñata. No, I'm kidding. And then you know, Jesus comes. He goes to have dinner with him, and then there's this transformation. I love and again, I love the part. Like, the religious people see who Jesus is having dinner with, and he's like, oh, he's with those notorious sinners. Not just sinners, notorious sinners.
That's I am.
You know, because some of you aren't just sinners, you're notorious. B.I.G. Anyway, old school. We're bringing it back. What's up? Sorry, I lived on the West Coast at the time, and anyway.
Oh my God.
West Coast filled with the Holy Ghost. Anyway. You know, there's Zacchaeus, but his life has changed, and what does he do? He gives. And you know, it's throughout the Bible. It's not just in the book of Luke. We see, you know, Paul, he's like the first missionary of the church. He goes from like killing Christians to being the guy talking about Jesus. And the Macedonians, they're having a rough time. But it says, you know, they were like dying. They wanted to have the privilege of giving, even in their rough circumstances. Because why? Because they're excited to be about a part of this thing. You know, here's the thing. If we pursued the kingdom of God with the same vigor that we pursue stuff in this world, how would that change the world? Because we all tend to, I'm speaking to all of us, I'm speaking to me, we all tend to have things we pursue that really don't matter. Matthew 13, you don't have this scripture with you, but or you might, or you do if it's in the Bible. I mean, you don't have it on it's not on the screen. It's not Lance's fault, it's not there. It says this, it says, it's a new one. God gave me a new one. No, I'm kidding. Matthew 13. Those of you who have this thing called a Bible, it's in there. Those of you who have a phone, it's in there. It was funny. I can't remember who I had a conversation with. They said something like, can you read the Bible off your phone in church? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, as long as you have glasses. And I was like, they were surprised, like, we allow that. I'm like, Yeah, I don't care. Anyway, if that was you, I don't remember who I had the conversation with, and I'm not making fun of you. I'm just laughing that I just was outside of my understanding that you wouldn't be able to read a Bible on the phone. Half the time I'm reading digitally and squishing this thing down. Anyway, Matthew 13. That's enough of a tangent. Tangent. I still remember Mr. Statham, my pre-cal teacher. He would do that, and it looked like he was doing Saturday Night Live. Anyway, so we do this when I say tangent. It's actually a tangent curve. Math joke for the two of us who cared about math. I think there's at least 3 people who care about math here. That's great. Sometimes we get slightly off topic.
Like now.
Like now. Anyway, if you don't like tangents, you have to find a squirrel. Anyway, Matthew 13. For those of us who are trying to get back on that's why I have an outline. I could do this without an outline. The outline keeps me from going on tangents more than Matthew 13. It says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that a man discovered hidden in a field, and his excitement he hid it again, and sold everything he owned to get enough money to buy the field." I love that one. And most of you know, when we're planting the church, you don't have any money when you're planting the church. At least we certainly didn't. And I was down this last weekend. I was down. I have the metal detector, and I was like finding stuff. And the best I've ever done is like I found like a Matchbox car. I think Elle and I found like $1.50. We went up where the people bring their money to the meter thing, and we just checked there because it's pretty good. And my nephew found some like World War II rounds and stuff that were unexploded. So keep meaning to bring those in for identification. But like you could actually find gold. And so when people ask me, if I find anything, I'm like, yeah, we find some gold doubloons and stuff. They're like, what? And I always picture, if like there was a beach house for sale. And for some reason, I was trespassing and found, a giant hoard of treasure coins. Now, this would probably be dishonest, but hey, it's a parable, just like Jesus told, right? If you knew there was buried treasure on that beachfront property, you would sell everything you had to get it, right? You'd sell your car, you'd sell your current house. People are like, why are you moving to the beach? You don't really have a job. You're like, just trust me. And then if you bought it, people would be like, dude, you're so lucky. That's awesome. That's a great investment, right? Because you knew what was there. Right. And that's what the gospel is like. It's like treasure in a field. It might be something people think you're nuts for believing. It might even be thinking, people like your actions don't look rational, but there's a reason for it. The gospel is a treasure in the field. It's the one thing that we naturally should put everything in about. We get more passionate about hobbies, sports, and etc. rather than God. Jesus came to fulfill the law and bring salvation, offer us a life. And there's appropriate responses to things. Like I love Star Wars, and some Han Solo right before he goes into Carbonite, Leia says to him, anyone know?
I love you.
And what's his response?
I know.
That's not an appropriate response. If someone says, I love you, generally, I know, is not the appropriate response, right? But really, the appropriate response to God, it does sound cool. But now you can say it like because your wife might know what it is because of Star Wars. But generally, that's not a good start for a relationship. It's a good end to one. But here, our response is: if you're not a believer and a follower, become a follower, become a disciple of Jesus. And what that means is. See, I think sometimes we make that into this moment and I made a decision to follow Jesus. I remember in college, I was talking to this person, and they were like, oh, I'm a believer. I'm like, really? Because I'm like, I'm new at this, but you just don't seem like you're living that life. And they're like, oh yeah, but I went one time up to this thing and I said this prayer. And I'm like, okay, well that doesn't really do a lot of good unless your life changes. I'm new to this, but I get that part. your life will look different because you learn to become like Jesus. And that's what, sometimes we don't say Christian here. We'll say a follower of Jesus. We'll say a disciple. Because what Jesus wants is people who followed and become like him. And that means his priorities become your priorities. It means we live our life differently. And one of the ways that's going to be is we'll spend our money and our finances differently. We'll live differently because of whose we are. And so if you're not a follower, remember what? Follow Jesus. I'd love to talk to you more about that. That prayer is sometimes a good marker on the roadway to go, this is when it started. But it's really this lifelong journey of, learning to live like Jesus and become like Jesus. And if you say you're following, then your response should be to change the way we live. We've talked about it before here. Time, treasure, talents. I'll start with treasure because we just talked about it. How wealth is a wonderful tool, but a terrible God. Like, it's not a bad thing to have money. It's a good thing to have money. It's a good thing to manage money wisely. But when it's your God, when it's the number one thing in your life, it's a bad thing. And money is not a possession. It's got an expiration date. It's a trust. It's something God's given you for a period of time. And ultimately, we will be judged by how we spend those things. Your place in heaven is guaranteed if you put your faith and trust in Jesus. But your position, your reward, depends on how we live. What we own is really on loan. I wrote that down. You can't take it with you. Time. Where do we spend our time? I'm not the preacher who hates TV and movies. I love TV and movies. Maybe too much sometimes. That's why I don't have the advanced cable package. Some of you have like the $400 a month cable package. I would never leave the house. I'd just be like, there might be something better on it. I've never settled on anything too, because sometimes we're at my parents' house. They have a lot of cable channels, and I just sit there and hunt the entire time because you don't want to commit to something because there could be something better on it. I like Netflix, but it's easy to kind of Netflix and chill forever. Different connotation I meant there. It's easy to kind of pop on Netflix. You find a new show, and next thing you know, it's 10 seasons later, and you haven't bathed. But I'm not saying you can't watch TV, you can relax, but relaxing can become an idol. Are you using your time to invest in people so that people become friends of Jesus, and so that there's eternal significance to it? Talents. What do we do with the gifts God's given us? Sometimes we take those gifts and we use them to serve our purposes instead of his. And it's okay to use your talents and things to make money, but, does God have that talent for you to do something? Now, I'm fortunate. One of the things I love doing, and some of you probably know because I talk about it sometimes, I'm sort of an egghead, weird academic type at heart. And so, it was funny. I was talking to somebody about, what I do, and you guys are part of it. I love, thanks for, letting me go. But I'll go, and I teach in Ethiopia for a week. And it's awesome. It's fun because they have the best food. Now, here's the thing. I don't get paid for that. People are like, you don't get paid, but you do it, and it takes all this time, and I have to grade papers. I was going to take tomorrow off, but instead I'm going to grade papers. Here's the thing. I have a talent for doing something. I get to use that in other places. I'll tell you the stories after this, but it's some cool stories that I don't necessarily want to be here because I might say something that I'm not supposed to mention on the internet. but some cool stuff that some of my students get to do. And I could hold my talent and kind of keep it to myself, but I can use it for them. And all of us have talents and abilities that can be used for the kingdom of God. And it might be here at this church. It might be outside of the church walls. It might be in another country even, going and serving. But God's given us all talents, and how we invest them for the future is part of what it means to follow Jesus. God wants us to be people who change the world. He wants us to use our resources, our money, our time, our talent to do that. So I want to end with a question this week. Are we living our lives? Are we using our time, our treasure, our talents in a way that really reflects who we want to be? Or is it, who God wants us to be? As the band comes back to play, as I said,